as previously discussed, is spend the next part of our time together talking about therapy. Now, we've spent the majority of our sessions and the many hours that we've chatted and walked through techniques in regards to the hypnotic techniques. Okay? The one thing I do want to make clear when it comes to therapy, the first thing we do not want to do is disregard a technique as being part of the therapeutic process. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We can look at therapy, or the techniques themselves, getting us to a place where therapy can exist. It's getting to a place where we can start to utilize therapy, start to create some sort of therapeutic outcome, and create the environments inside the unconscious that allows therapy to stick. So, but there's a simple system, no matter what style of therapy, no matter what style of coaching you do, no matter what style of hypnotist you become, there's a simple format we follow, and we've been following it throughout every technique that allows us to stick to the same system for therapy as we do techniques, which makes it nice and easy to remember. Okay, so before we get into that, give me your interpretation of therapy. When we say, being that we are hypnotherapists, when we talk about therapy, what is therapy to you? What's your understanding?
My understanding of therapy is interaction to facilitate change in the other person. So I don't actually, I coach, well, I give them direction and seed suggestion. And from those seeded suggestions, they either take them on board or not. And then the ones they do take on board, fine, they run with, and they then produce change.
Excellent.
So we're all change agents, pretty much.
Excellent. And where does a person have to be for therapy to take place and for therapy to make the changes that we need to acquire as a hypnotherapist?
They have to be...
We're inside the mind.
Oh, in the unconscious.
Of course. And being that we've spent many, many dozens of hours looking at techniques, what essentially does a technique do?
A technique gets them to bypass their conscious so that we can access the unconscious.
Excellent. So the technique we can look on a very simplistic and basic level is we use techniques to bypass the critical mind, correct?
Yeah.
Now, when a client comes to see us, what part of the mind are they in that's created the problem?
They're in the conscious part.
That's right. So if a client comes in with conscious thinking, conscious interpretations, conscious intellectualizations of the problem, conscious I've tried this and I've tried that, ideally the first thing we need to do is stop that part of the mind from over-analyzing anything, because that could be one of the reasons they're there. So essentially we use these techniques to do this, to penetrate the unconscious minds, and we use these techniques to keep them in the unconscious long enough to allow us to do therapy. Does that format sit properly with what we've talked about so far?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I mean about not discouraging yourself to say, well, a technique is just for this and the therapy is just for this. Being that therapy is something we do while in the unconscious, with the basic understanding of what techniques do, they're essentially doing the same things. We're using different strategies, different maneuvers to keep someone in an unconscious state long enough to allow the unconscious mind to solve an issue. Okay, What we do with therapy is we keep them there. We keep the unconscious mind stimulated. That's the key word for today. Stimulated long enough so this therapy can take place. Now, there's many ways to do therapy. We've looked at stories. We're going to look at parts integration today. We can look at even the confusion language. You can look at analogies. You can look at word puns and jokes. You can look at working with symbols. You can look at working with hypnotic phenomena. Above all else, the strategies we're going to use for therapy just keep a client in the unconscious mind long enough. Now, we have to be very careful when it comes to therapy to not violate one of the most common rules violated by hypnotists and coaches. What do you think this rule, if we're going to the therapy component of our session, is the most violated rule, I think, in the hypnosis industry? What do you think that is?
Give the client the answer.
Excellent. Now, when you think about that, it's a very simple rule to follow, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Following is easy, but acquiring the right strategies to not do that gets a little bit difficult.
Exactly.
Okay, a lot of the hypnosis industry, and it's a little bit sad, it's unfortunate, think that we essentially put a client into the unconscious mind or an unconscious state or subconscious, whatever you want to call it, and we just tell them what to do. It's like we give them a simple download and say, you need to think this, you think this, and the unconscious mind says, yes, I'll do that. And I think that comes from the mindset of the unconscious mind is very much a servant to what we say. It is, if it agrees with what we're saying. But even above that, we look at it like this. If we can nudge the unconscious mind to make the same decision that we'd ultimately like it to make, it's a win-win for all of us. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at therapy. Let's discuss this style of therapy. The first place we need to look at is, I'm going to ask you, and I think I've asked you this question before, but I'd just be curious your understanding with that little monologue I just gave you. What happens inside the unconscious mind that allows a client to make a therapeutic outcome? What's the simplest understanding you have from that?
Good question. What makes the client make therapy change?
Yes.
You've seeded the suggestion, and it takes it as an option, I suppose.
Beautiful. I like the way you said that, as an option. Fantastic. What else does it do? So we definitely have the idealism of using suggestions, and it takes them as an option. And this is the reason why we don't just give one suggestion. We give many suggestions so the unconscious mind can categorize through them all. And it's got the choice whether it uses any of those, none of those, or all of them put together.
Yeah, it can do law of association. It can utilize law of association.
Yes.
By basically, in things like storytelling, which is no real suggestion, but it can then link things together that probably you would never have thought of linking together, but it would link them together because of the way that the unconscious mind operates.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Associations. And we've spent a lot of time exploring associations, haven't we?
We have.
We've done this through symbolism. We've done this through stories, as you suggested. We've done this through analogies. We've done this through hypnotic phenomena. We've done this through teaching towers. We've done this through the Ericksonian approach. They're all associations. And the biggest association we can gather is through memories. And we looked at this last time. Okay, by inviting the unconscious mind to remember a past memory or a memory of childhood, a universal strategy that we as kids all use. These are all utilization of an association. So there are two things. We've got association, we've got suggestion. What else do we have inside the unconscious mind that allows it to make a therapeutic change?
What else is in there?
Yeah, what else occurs? I think very, very simplistic. These are all perfect, by the way, so you're a lot more advanced than I could even hope for. So this is brilliant. Your understanding is right on par.
So what else happens? You're giving the unconscious time to actually do what it wants to do instead of the conscious going, you don't want to do that.
Yes, 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 yes. That's as basic as I want to keep it.
Cool.
We're giving the unconscious mind time to do what it does best. Now, what's some presuppositions of the unconscious mind that we're very familiar with?
That the unconscious mind is there to help you and protect you.
Excellent. Beautiful. Brilliant. It's there doing its job. It is always working towards health, wealth, happiness, joy, successful life, business, creating money, creating circumstances, creating a love life, creating friendship. It does all these automatically. Now, what happens is when the therapy part comes into it, we as the hypnotist, and I've fallen into this myself in my very early stages as a young buck, so to speak, was I thought being the therapist and all the tools and strategies I knew that I would be able to impart my decision-making ability, but also the way I think a client should make a life change, and just tell a client what to do at an unconscious stage, and that'll be the end of it. But we know that my conscious mind and your conscious mind is nowhere near as powerful or creative as the unconscious mind of the subject or client. But we fall into that trap of trying to teach our clients something. We fall into the trap of trying to coach our clients. Now, these have a part, but not where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay? So absolutely. We look at it as we just want to keep them in an unconscious state long enough, and every time the conscious mind pokes its head out, we have a technique to get rid of it. Now, we know that the conscious mind is never fully offline. It's going to come back and forward. So what if our only goal for the next couple of sessions was to keep a client so unconscious, and then we just had to figure out some sort of therapy to stimulate it so it actually stay unconscious. I mean, that's a pretty easy equation to play with, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, any questions from that so far? Just laying down the groundwork of where we're going.
No, probably the only thing I would say though is
Yes.
that with all of our techniques that we do,
Yes.
we bolt the therapy part into it in some form of like Trojan horse. So
Yes.
the client will be able to not see where technique ends, therapy starts, because you can just offload everything in one head.
Excellent. And that is the whole purpose behind conversational hypnosis. That's the essence. It's to hide therapy and combine therapy and techniques and analogies and stories and testing and all that sort of, to combine it into, like you said, one Trojan horse, so it becomes a surprise. Yeah. Absolutely. This is what I mean about the techniques themselves. Any technique we've gone through, and the many more we've got to go through, become therapeutic. They become a part of the therapy. Why? Because we're putting them in an unconscious state where therapy exists. We don't want to divide up the sessions, because then if a client can follow, there's that conscious mind poking its head in. Okay? Yeah. So let's get started on this day. I want to look at parts therapy. Now, parts therapy was made famous, obviously, by the NLP movement, taken from more the Ericksonian approach, which is to work with two parts. Now, we've looked at programs or parts when we look at the more confusion style language, when we have two different programs running in the unconscious at the one time. That's the more advanced strategies. We're going to look at this on a very simplistic level. What's your understanding of parts? When we talk about parts therapy or parts integration, what's your understanding?
Right. My understanding of parts therapy, or my understanding of parts, is your unconscious is trying to protect you. So it's trying to do everything sort of under its power to try and, give you health, wealth, understanding, and all that thing. But of course, if, let's say, you have someone who smokes, they'll sit there and they'll go, well, I understand that I've got to give up because it's for health reasons and for money reasons, but you know what? I really love a cigarette at the end of a meal. So, of course, then you've got two parts. You've got two conflicting elements.
Yes.
In essence.
Excellent.
So, go on.
No, brilliant. I like the way you said that. Two conflicting elements. That's exactly what parts are.
Yeah, and then, because you've got different parts or different facets to the unconscious and the conscious. And you might want to do something like let's just say I want to set up a hypnotherapy practice.
Yes.
By the end of the year or by the end of the month.
Yes.
But it's a bit of me that goes, it could go downhill rather south rather quickly, and I don't think you're ready for it. So that's my confliction, just let's say, in that idea. Yes. So what you have to do is you'd have to somehow get some form of strategy together, whereas both parts will go, right, that's all right, we understand where we're going now, and then sort of join them together. Yes. And then they can both go forwards with the same goal.
Excellent. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to explore how to use both parts of the mind and point them in the same direction. Now, we understand the part of us that starts the problem, just as an analogy, which is the conscious mind. We understand this. I want to do this, but I can't.
Yeah.
So why is parts such a problem, or having a parts conflict such a problem for clients? If we understand the conscious part, where does the problem lie? Why can't we just solve it and, work towards something that we really want?
Because the problem lies in the unconscious, because you've got, problem lies, the solution lies in the unconscious, and there's that barrier between the conscious and the unconscious that stops you from going in and out.
Yes.
In essence.
Absolutely. So if we have the unconscious conflict along with the conscious conflict, and they conflict together, putting aside the idea the unconscious mind will always win, that's very true, but we're going to take a little bit further than that, because that gives us a solution, but not the solution to actually solve the problem. It gives us more of a tactic, or just an understanding. So the problem lies is because we have a conflict, we want to do something, but something else gets in the way, or we feel something else. But then we think, well, it must mean it's because of this. I'm scared or I'm nervous. Now, automatically, me thinking of what the real problem is, which is unconscious, what have I done that really doesn't serve us?
You've exacerbated the problem.
I've exacerbated the problem, absolutely. Why would that be?
Because you sat there and you thought about it, and your conscious has now gone, yeah, you know, you're right on that.
Yes.
It doesn't really serve. So it's like sort of, let's just say it was something that you go, oh, you know, I want to do X, but I don't have enough money for it. And then you'll sit there and go, you're right, you don't have enough money. Oh dear. So, you know, so you're never going to go forward, because you're never going to ever feel that you've probably got enough money for doing whatever it is you want, or you're never going to be confident enough to go into a bar and chat up women or whatever it is. So, you know, you're going to be, you know, your conscious has then come online and gone, you know, yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. So you're adding to the problem with more conscious thoughts.
Yeah.
And we know that those conscious thoughts actually fuel the issue as it stands. But something else that happens, which is interesting, is if we consciously consider what the problem is and we go, you know what, I think it's this, what are the chances we actually get it right?
Oh, nil.
Nil. How can we at a conscious level even come close to understanding the unconscious? It's impossible. We could miss the mark. It could be something that happened to us when we were 2 years old that we would never even think of, even if we spend years trying to think of what it is, even come close. And that is the whole purpose behind trance, is to get rid of that conscious thinking that a client has and explore them more at unconscious level. But we can do this in regards to a parts integration. Now, the most classical parts integration, have you ever seen a parts integration live? Have you ever done one or had experienced one before?
Yes.
Okay, so the general parts integration is generally used, let's say in the NLP world, it's done in a very formal setting. It's done, we use an action sequence that we play with that comes along with symbols, which we'll talk about very soon. But what I want to explore is more the system of a parts integration and do it more conversationally, being that we're conversational hypnotists. The whole premise behind the parts integration is to align up the conscious goal with the unconscious goal. And this is great for goal setting. But parts integration, I want to play with one scenario that it tends to come up with, which is inside weight loss. Okay, and this just doesn't stick to weight loss. Please don't think that this is the only technique you'll ever use for weight loss, but it tends to come up more often than not. The weight loss parts integration comes up like this. You'll be sitting with a client and you'll hear something like this. You'll be exploring the problem and your client will express their issue with something like this. Part of me really wants to lose weight, but I really enjoy junk food. In smoking terms, I really want to quit smoking, but I love being social when I smoke.
Yeah.
Now, how do we know this is a parts integration?
Because you've got the two parts that are in conflict.
Yeah, they're going in different directions.
Yeah.
And it's usually expressed by one word. I want this, but I want this.
Yeah.
I want this, however, this is really cool. I hate this about myself, but I really like this part. Okay? So just on a very simplistic level, listening out for words like but that negate what have just been said clearly shows the unconscious conflict, but also the conscious conflict as well. Okay? So, how do we do this? Well, let's put this in the context of working with a client. First thing we need to do is wait for that parts integration. Wait for that parts to be highlighted. Now, this is when it comes back to not pre-planning your session, not thinking, well, this is going to be a weight loss session, it's got to be a parts integration. We're going to look at this over the next couple of sessions in regards to that it's come up naturally. So we're exploring the problem the way that we do, and then all of a sudden, one of the answers to our question comes up in the frame of a parts integration. So you're happy with that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm your client. Let's just see where you might go with this first, just off the top of your head. I'm your client and I've said, well, I really want to lose weight, but I enjoy eating junk food. What would your next step be if you were going to consider using a parts integration? Knowing that you don't know it yet, but where does your mind automatically go?
I would explore possibly what they liked about junk food, possibly just as an outsider, just just to see what their real reaction is, just to see if it's just, oh, I like this, but